Porque uno de los grandes cocos de todos los seres humanos es saber decir no. Y si lo complicamos aún más, es poder poner límites. Y les digo una cosa, hablando netas con ustedes, cada vez que hablamos de cosas como la gente que da de más y que está cansada de sentirse abusado por su familia, por sus amigos, en realidad es un tema de límites. Y los que están cansados de que la relación con su pareja no saben en qué momento se volvió absolutamente desventajosa, en qué momento perdieron voz y voto, fue también un tema de límites. Y si ustedes también son papás y no entienden, no pueden creer en qué momento sus hijos se salieron de control, se invirtieron los papeles y casi los que mandan son ellos, también son falta de límites. Y hoy está con nosotros un experto en límites, el autor del libro que se hizo muy famoso, Don't Believe Everything You Think, o sea, no crean todo lo que piensan, traducido en 31 idiomas, ha ayudado a mucha gente a darse cuenta de quiénes son realmente y de qué pata cojean. Hoy tiene un nuevo libro que se llama Los límites liberan y cómo establecer límites. Please welcome my dear Joseph Nguyen desde Orlando, Florida.
Thank you so much, Martha. It's such a pleasure and such a joy as always.
The pleasure is ours for you to be here. And I believe, Joseph, that boundaries are at play in every relationship, whether with your kids, your family, your boss, your coworkers, because who you are in one area of your life tends to reflect in all the others.
Oh yeah, how you do one thing is how you do everything. That the age-old adage is 100% true. And especially what we do behind closed doors, too. Like even if there's no one there, how we treat ourselves is also going to be a reflection of how we treat other people. And it's very interesting. It's always a two-way street. And boundaries are the people that probably struggle most with it are people pleasers. The ones that grew up that had to become an adult way sooner than they should have, right? The ones where the kids were basically taking care of their parents because, or even other siblings, because their parents weren't around. They were always working. And that's not the fault of their parents always. That's just how life is. It's so difficult to live nowadays. And so we kind of created a preserving mechanism of constantly saying yes to everyone, trying to make sure everyone's taken care of. But the issue with that is that we never found out how to set those boundaries. And so we give way more than what we have. And when we do that, at the end of the day, we always feel exhausted, drained, stressed, anxious, and we can never turn off our minds because we're always thinking about who needs my help? How can I help? And this comes from a good place, right? That's not quote unquote bad. It's us wanting to just be there for other people out of love. But what happens is if we're not filling our own cups first, then we have nothing left to give. And if we do begin to take the power back, and this isn't to say that when we set boundaries, we stop helping people. That's not it at all. There's a way where both can coexist. There's a way where you can set boundaries and still help other people. And an example of that would just mean, okay, let's say we don't like how our parents are talking to us or other people or our boss is talking to us. We can set a boundary and say, hey, I don't really appreciate how I'm being talked to in this way. It makes me feel like I'm not understood or disrespected or in any sort of way. And maybe the other person didn't even know that they were talking to you that way. That's just how they always talk. And there's some sort of miscommunication there. And so when you bring that to light, then you can actually find a way to live harmoniously with other people and not have to give too much of yourself anymore. And so that's a way that you can fill your own cup while being able to give more. And that's the best way to live.
So let me ask you this. Living without boundaries often comes down to feeling guilt, right? And it's easy to say no, for example, when you don't have the means to help. But it gets very tricky when you can help and still choose not to.
That's a beautiful distinction. This is when it gets so nuanced that the only answer is not something I can prescribe anyone, but it's an answer more so about how do you actually feel? And what is your heart saying in the moment? Your intuition, you can call that God, whatever word you want to use. But in that moment, are you listening to your heart or are you listening to the mind, which is more concerned about fear and self-preservation? And in most instances, when we go against our heart, we will feel pain, even though we're helping other people. And then we'll kind of get pleasure from helping other people, but denying what we truly want and need in the moment.
Yeah.
And we do that over and over again, and years pass, and then we ask ourselves, why are we so unfulfilled? Why does
Exactly.
my life look like this?
Yeah.
And once we listen to our heart, we can actually help more people because we're coming more from a place of love rather than fear.
So then why is it so hard for us to set boundaries? Does it come from childhood? Is it something that we learn? Or is it tied to our personality, our temperament, to family roles? Because we're professionals at saying yes to everything, right?
Yes. Mostly it came from the way that we were raised. So
Mm-hmm.
when we are raised, a lot of times, I mean, when we're thinking as a child, all we want is the approval of our parents. We just want to be loved. And if we are loved, then we are safe and we don't have to worry about anything else. And so, what we subconsciously learn is that we need to say yes all the time to our parents, to anyone that's older than us, or anyone that asks us of anything, so that we can be liked, so that we can be loved. And that way, we'll feel like we love ourselves. Because most of us have never spent enough time alone asking ourselves the hard questions of, do I even like myself? Do I love myself? Not worrying about anyone else. And we live our lives so much for other people that we forget ourselves. But that's the person that we need
Yeah.
to love most in order to give more love to others. That's where the source of abundance comes from. But we neglect that a lot. And so it's just learned from childhood, and it's just how we did it. It's nothing, no one's fault really, right?
Mm.
But when we become self-compassionate about that, then we can see like,
Yeah.
oh, I was just a child, and it's okay.
Okay. Okay. So do you think this is also linked to the personality? Like, I think that some people are natural problem solvers. They're efficient and capable of navigating challenges. So apart from childhood, could it also be personality and temperament?
It depends on your source of motivation, right? So if
Yeah.
we're saying yes to everyone and everything and trying to get their approval and be liked, that might be a road that we said, or that might be a belief system that we have that says, if I say yes to everything, then I will become more successful. Then I will be this. But then, like, what is
Mm-hmm.
success? Is
Mm-hmm.
this worth the cost of success? Being depleted all the time,
Exactly.
stressed, anxious, right?
Exactly.
And then the
Absolutely.
other question is there a way to achieve that success without denying ourselves, without sacrificing ourselves in the process, right?
Mm-hmm,
Then
mm-hmm,
it becomes
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
more creative and expansive.
Yeah. Well, last week we spoke to Ariel Grunwald, one of our teachers, about the bread of shame and the importance of setting boundaries. Why do we feel so guilty when we set limits, when we say no? And I think that especially in cultures like ours, where sacrifice is considered as such a virtue and an intrinsic part of somebody who is a good person.
So there are so many examples. For instance, my parents, they will, and I love them so much, but they will give every single thing that they have, every minute of their time, every dollar that they have to the church, right? So they're Catholic, they're born and raised Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
but they will give everything, and they are amazing people for doing that. But in the process, they don't have any time off. They
Yeah.
never like save for retirement. They were working all the time, and then on weekends they would go and to the church, and we would have to go with them, so we didn't really get to spend much time with them. So
Yeah.
it in the mind, I think we've created a zero sum game where it's, if we're not sacrificing ourselves, we're not helping others, and no
Yeah.
one really thinks that, is it possible to help other people without sacrificing yourself and
Yeah.
everything that you have, without
Yeah.
stressing yourself out, without going over the limits of what's possible?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to really address that.
Well, there's even sayings like moms never die of overeating. They'll take food out of their mouths to feed their kids, depleting themselves entirely to help everyone else. And then what happens is that when you try to set a boundary, like telling your family, I can't help this time, I'm not going to be able to do that, you feel like the worst person on earth. So how do we resist the guilt and the pressure it entails?
It's extremely difficult, probably one of the most difficult things. And it's so important then to kind of remember why why'd you even set the limit or the boundary in the first place? You know, what were you missing that you needed? And is it true that you're not able to help in the way that they asked? Because if it's not money, maybe we can help in other ways that we might have more availability at that time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So once we set a boundary now, it doesn't mean it's forever. Maybe we just need to recollect our thoughts, recollect our emotions, recollect just time for ourselves, and then go back out and help. And the question I always go back to ask myself is, am I able to help more people when I'm happy or when I'm stressed? When I am more at peace or when I'm super anxious? And so if I don't help myself, I'm not gonna help anyone anyway.
Yo creo que una de las cosas que yo más admiro de mi mamá fue la capacidad de poner límites, disciplinarnos, corregirnos, a pesar de la presión de no caerle bien a tus hijos. Y no le importaba si volteábamos los ojos, si no le hablábamos 3 días, si estábamos del peor humor, ella resistía, porque al final lo importante es de dónde vienen los límites. Y yo creo que en el caso de los papás, normalmente vienen de un profundo amor, porque disciplinar es muy cansado, poner límites a los hijos es muy cansado, por el cómo crees que mala, los azotones de puerta, las caras, los malos modos y los ojos volteados, pero viene de un lugar amoroso.
The first thing is you have to be okay with not being liked, because we lived our lives trying to gain the approval of other people, and now we're trying to switch that entire identity around to, oh, if I'm not liked, then what am I? If I'm not liked by my parents, by my brother, by my friends, by whoever, then what am I? But is it true that you're not a good person if you're not liked? Is it possible for you to still be a good parent and not be liked by other people? We're always going to be disliked by someone. But does that mean that we can't still love the people that are in our family?
Bueno, ¿cuántos de ustedes, como papás, les cuesta muchísimo trabajo ponerle límites a sus hijos? Porque les cuesta mucho trabajo resistir, sentirte con una mala mamá o un mal papá, sentirte como la peor persona sobre la faz de la tierra. Pero también, ¿cuántos de ustedes les cuesta mucho trabajo resistir la presión de no caerle bien a sus hijos? Well, in the book, you have even exercises, like very clear bullet points on how to organize yourself to learning how to set boundaries.
Yes. And it's very simple. I mean, the first thing is just to become aware of what is it that is causing you a lot of suffering? Where are you overstepping your boundaries? And once you're doing that and you figure that out, what's a way that you can create a boundary that would preserve and protect your peace, or at least give you joy? And then you kind of said it. It's quite simple. But most of us are you have to more so deal with the fear of setting that boundary rather than setting the boundary. Like most of the times we know what boundaries we need with our parents, with our friends, with our coworkers, our boss. We know what it is. We're just afraid to set it. And what I love to do is just don't think about setting boundaries permanently. Just try it for 7 days, for 1 month, and see how your life feels afterwards. You don't have to believe anything I say, but you should go try it and see if it helps you. And if it doesn't, that's okay. You can find something else that will work. But if you try it and it works, then you keep doing it. And the most important metric is, how at peace do you feel? How much more love do you feel? And in that way, you're able to give more of that to other people. And so that's the kind of the process of finding out what it is that you're wanting to set a boundary on, setting it and removing the fear behind it, and being okay with the consequences of setting that, and then setting the declaration.
Joseph, thank you so much for this conversation. I told everybody that your book is now available in Spanish, and I encourage everyone to read it.
Thank you so much, Martha. You're always such a joy and just radiating with happiness and passion. So thank you. It's such an honor.
No, likewise, my friend. All the way to Orlando, Florida. A big kiss to you.
Thank you, Martha. Much love to you.
Thank you.